Experience the future of packaging and processing up close and in action. Explore groundbreaking innovations, engage with hands-on solutions, and connect with the experts transforming the industry. See how these advancements can revolutionize your products, production lines, and business. It all starts here. Don't miss out. Register today at packexpolasvegas.com/unpackedpod. You're listening to Unpacked with PMMI, where we share the latest packaging and processing industry insights, research, and innovations to help you advance your business. Hi, I'm Sean Riley, and welcome to another edition of Unpacked with PMMI. Many of our episodes as of late deal with best practices for navigating a manufacturing environment that, like the rest of the world, was turned on its head in March. In an effort to continue to provide value to the packaging and processing industry, we continue to mine ways we can help from the many business solutions PMMI has put together. Today we go inside the numbers with PMMI's Vice President of Market Development, Jorge Izquierdo. Jorge knows global marketing and business intelligence better than anyone. He tells us how things looked from the end of 2019 into pre-pandemic 2020, how the industry has kept its nose above water and in many cases thrived during the past 7 months, what we can expect as we approach the end of 2020, and fingers crossed, offer some hope for 2021. We always love to have our next guest on the pod, and we're very happy to welcome back Jorge Izquierdo. Jorge, how are you?
Doing great, Sean. Thank you for inviting me again. It's always a pleasure to be here with you.
Let's dive right in. So talking about the beginning of 2020, it was a different world. Meetings,
absolutely,
then suddenly had to be postponed. Cities were shut down. Even my nephew's wedding was canceled. So shout out to Miles and Jess, whose wedding had to be canceled. All these things kind of grinded to a halt, and it's been very much the same thing over and over since then. So just kind of to give us a reminder, could you kind of tell us how things were looking for the industry and how everything was sort of before the pandemic? You know, how did the year start for us?
Well, let me start by telling you how we ended last year, because that's really the beginning of the story. Last year, 2019 was in general maybe not the strongest year for the industry, but a pretty good year. You know, the industry growth at 3.6%. We were hitting $10.8 billion in terms of turnover. Out of those 10.8 billion, about 8 from local manufacturers, pretty much PMI members, and they actually, their share grow even more. They grew at 4.1%. So it was pretty decent, you know. So as we were moving into 2020, the backlogs from 2019 were at 2.5 billion. That's very healthy. For many of the manufacturers of equipment, that meant they were booked for, in some cases, you know, for the first 6 months of the year, maybe more. You know, in general, it looked pretty good. The beginning of 2020, maybe it was not going to be the greatest year, but it was going to be a pretty decent year. And as you said, you know, suddenly COVID happened, you know, and things changed.
So our years have we've sustained good years. Like, it's been a nice run for our industry in terms of, you know, production for the last couple of years. So it was just kind of continuing that trend, correct?
Yeah. It's been a kind of, you're right, a good number of years of growth. It was kind of expected maybe this year to slow down a little, you know, but not significantly.
Okay.
But let me tell you, you know, as COVID started, you know, the same as many of us, you know, it's for our industry, we started with few plant closures, with some office closures. The good thing, as packaging in general is considered an essential business, you know, because it's a role on the food, beverage, and pharma supply chain. You know, most of our members' businesses remain open. You know, just a few plants closed, I guess, around April, May. But by July this year, all of the manufacturing operations were open. In terms of office closures, you know, they were, as expected, higher. You know, and when I talk about office closures, I mean working remotely. But same things, it's most of the offices are back to business, if not at 100%, it's at least partially present and partially working remotely. So that part somehow has been addressed and didn't impact significantly our industry. The one part that hit a little harder at the beginning of the years was kind of in terms of business, the part of quotations and orders. We immediately saw a significant decline in terms of quotations in March. The same situation between quotations and orders happened in April. And then something interesting happened. We were wondering now if there was going to be a significant slowdown through the rest of the year. But I'm pretty sure you've heard, it's when you chat with anybody in the food, the beverage, the pharmaceutical industry, household chemicals, they are very busy. They were very busy. They are still very busy. They are not working at 100%. They're working 110. And that brought a lot of activity back to our members, all that downturn that we started to see in March, April, we saw a recovery in terms of quotations in May and in terms of orders in June. And that recovery, from now, it's turning into a kind of more optimistic, and I should be careful here for most of the members. So it's very different. If you sell to food, beverage, personal care, household chemicals, that's great. If you sell more to the industrial side of the business, it's still hard, and it's going to be hard for the next several months. But what can I tell you from the last reading we had on our index for quotation orders in October, it was very optimistic. It's been the highest it's been in years. So it seems I don't have a number. I would want to tell you, hey, the sales are going to grow by this much this year. But I can tell you, I think that at least we're going to hit the same level as 2019. Maybe 2020 is going to be a growth year at the end of the day.
Wow, that's good to hear. Some level of good news. We don't get a lot of that. When we say, just for clarifications, that I know we're saying all the people that are doing good and are getting better. What the industrial side that's not so much? What businesses, for our listeners, what would that kind of touch on?
Well, that would be like, to some degree, construction has not been as active, but automotive parts, that kind of product.
I see what you're saying. Things that are more for
industrial use,
less consumables,
exactly.
Let's say. Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense.
Another aspect, for our members was the part of the supply chain, and that was I would say it was an issue, and it's still an issue. From the information we're getting from our members, thing wasn't really that bad March, April, but by the time we hit June, July, they started to see more and more delays in terms of components, parts, sub-assemblies. We hit maybe the highest level in maybe September, and the last reading we have for October, it's improving. It's better, but it's not yet resolved. There's still to some degree, some supply chain issues. It's not terrible, but it's not a reason for, I guess, for most of the members or most of the manufacturers not to deliver an order. But it just keep them in their toes, right? Kind of trying to find different suppliers.
Now, you're also our global, all things global when it comes to our industry. So speaking of supply chain, that obviously caused a hiccup with all of this because, we couldn't get things from overseas and stuff like that. Do you see a lot of that being moved back to either North America or people getting their supplies closer? Or do you think that's a temporary thing, or will that be a long-term solution? How do you see that playing out?
I think in general, some I would say they will be moving closer, and I wouldn't necessarily say because of COVID. Maybe COVID we had one more reason to do it, but it's because of all this situation with China and the trade barriers, the duties and taxes. Kind of the war between the US and China lately. I think it's happening. Sometimes it's moving just from China to other places in Asia, but in other cases could be from Mexico to the US and Canada.
So you also, in the business intelligence world, you monitor the data pretty much monthly. And I know our monthly business indicator that we send out tracks the business activity for CPGs. So what can you kind of share with us about that?
Well, it's the same thing. Some good signs in terms of good business for, I guess, next year, for the end of the year, next year. We started to track a couple of things with CPGs that are very relevant to our members. I guess the one that was more impacted with COVID was how much CPGs were allowing service technicians and sales staff to visit their plants and their operations. And if you ask me, maybe that's the area where we got more problems in the industry, how to provide service, how to support our customers, keep their operations running when the rules of social distancing keep you from sending your technicians, or if you're sending them, then you need to quarantine them maybe 2 weeks on the way in and 2 weeks on the way back. So I think that's the one thing that complicated more the business of our members. And it's interesting because we track service on one hand, we track the use of remote access on the other. And we could see how at some point, for example, CPGs were refusing the access to service technicians at a level of 67, 70%. So it was very high. And at the same time, we saw a significant increase in the use of remote access technologies. Yes, I'm talking about those technologies that are included in the equipment, in many of the machines these days. That there's been some reticence, by CPGs to use them. There's a lot of, as you know, the IT part of the business is not necessarily convinced, that it's safe to make these connections and to allow these people to access the information of their companies. That's on one hand, but on the other hand, now, through all these limitations during COVID, they have recognized the importance and the value that remote access has to their operations in terms of keeping them running and reliability, of course. And that's kind of talking high tech, but also, talking as simple as FaceTime, Skype, all kind of applications, just to have some video and lots of improvisation as well. We're the ones that kept the industry running for the past few months.
Yeah, it's and I say this all the time because we always seem to get back on these pods to talking about remote access and how it's the one silver lining that's come out of all this. And it just, I've been to a dozen top to tops and other meetings where we've talked about things like this for the last, decade. And it was always, this, like you said, this reticence to use remote access, even though, people are doing their banking on their phone, but they're not trusting of, someone that they're doing business with to share. And I guess it's a shame it took something like this, but it has shown that this can really save, travel expenses and things like that during a time like this when you can't even travel. So forget about the expense. You just can't do it. How much this remote monitoring and remote access has really, been helpful for our industry.
Yeah, so it's interesting, Sean. You were earlier, you make reference to our purchasing index. Number one, it's very optimistic. Mainly as we said, food, beverage, pharma are very optimistic for next year. One of the questions that we added this year was about remote access and the perspective of increasing the investment in remote access. Very, very high response there in terms of that's the expectation for the future. In fact, we have many comments in terms of saying, moving forward, we're not buying any equipment that does not have remote access capabilities.
So it's just a complete about face from a year or two ago, where now it's a requirement.
It's a different reality for sure.
Yeah. Okay, well then, speaking of the future, I guess let's kind of round this off with, what do we expect for the rest of the year? And I know that's probably going to, elections and stuff may play into that, but what do we expect for our industry coming out of 2020 and then, heading into 2021? What do you have on the table for us?
Well, first in terms of 2020, so of course we've seen all the changes that COVID has brought to our lives. From staying more time at home, cooking at home, watching Netflix movies, shows, hopefully exercising a little more. But all this has changed the way we consume things. Using more delivery services, from food, groceries, restaurant, maybe trying meal kits. When you're going to the store, maybe using more the self-checkout, more of the options of curbside pickup, these kind of products. And for sure, when you look at the numbers of e-commerce, at the beginning of the year, it was estimated about 11% of retail was done via e-commerce. And now it's expected that by the end of the year, this number is going to be 14%. And this is one of these things that we believe that they are coming and they're going to stay. So the trend of more e-commerce, more omni-channel growing, for sure. We saw, of course, during this year, like I guess April, May, maybe June as well, the drivers for picking the products that you were buying at the supermarket were not the same as the drivers last year. The drivers were pretty much availability and convenience, whatever you could find. All what we saw in past years in terms of SKU explosion turns into an SKU implosion, really. And while this is happening, it's interesting. We've been asking CPGs, so what's happening here? What of these things are going to stay? Where are we going? And the one thing we're getting is, well, SKUs it's a temporary thing. They will go back to multiple SKUs, multiple formats. Maybe premiumization won't back as quickly. Very likely we'll go through a kind of a recession period. It's going to take us some time to get out of the economic situation we're in. But certainly SKUs the use of SKUs will be increasing in the future. So we asked the CPGs in the past couple of months, well, where are you planning to invest your money in the future, in kind of general terms? And not surprisingly, Sean, the first comment was, number one is going to be on secondary packaging. Some of these related, I guess, to e-commerce, the different formats, omni-channel. But number one, they will be investing in secondary packaging, then primary packaging, and then more investments on the processing side. But pretty much secondary packaging is one of the things that we're going to see growing maybe the fastest in coming months. In terms of the drivers of why they will be investing and what type of equipment they will be buying, in addition to this, I guess we will be moving back to some of the drivers. A big change from 2020 to 2021 is kind of going back a little more to what we saw in 2019 in terms of the number one is meeting demand. And that's, I guess, 2020 requirement. But when you look at equipment reliability, changeover times, flexibility for multi-packs, variety packs, just being ready to use new materials for more recyclable packaging, more flexibility in terms of the materials that you can use, size reduction in terms of retail, certainly more shelf-ready packaging, product visibility. So I guess in a few words, we will be retaking the trends that were driving the industry in 2019. I guess the one part that we will be carrying on from 2020 is meeting increasing demand. That's for sure significantly a part of what happened in 2020 in terms of many of the consumers going to the supermarkets more and more and going to institutional channels like restaurants. Less. So that's something that I think it's going to stay a little longer with us.
Understood. Well, that did it for me. I mean, that gave us the state of the industry for 2020 in a very uneven time. From, like you said, we started off doing pretty good, and we had some hiccups in between. But being this industry and how essential it is, we persevered and in some cases excelled. So I just want to thank you again. This is a highlight for us to have you on. Thank you again for taking time out of your day to come on here and talk to us, Jorge.
Sean, it's always a pleasure. And wish all your audience the best for the rest of 2020 and a great 2021.
Please rate, review, and subscribe. To do that, go to the iTunes podcast or Spotify app on your phone and search for UnPACKed with PMMI.